Welcome everybody to the channel. Here at Stranger Fruit, we provide Black and minority medical professionals the space to share fruits of wisdom, knowledge, and vulnerability, hoping these seeds help you grow in your life and the lives of those around you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you've returned for more fruit, I'm glad we can provide something meaningful to come back to. Today's episode is titled With Grit, and it's a conversation that gets to the very root of resilience. Grit isn't about enduring hardships, it's about the commitment to a goal, an unshakable belief in the journey, and the persistence to keep pushing even when the path isn't easy. Whether it's in our training, our personal lives, or the silent moments no one sees, grit is the thing that keeps us anchored and moving forward. But there's another layer to it. At its core, grit also refers to something earthy, real, like a grain of sand or stone. In nature, grit is what gives soil its strength. It prevents erosion and helps things take root. Without grit, the soil of our lives may be too soft to support anything of substance. But let's be honest, sometimes that grit can get in the way. It can end up in our eye, blur our vision, and make it hard to see what really matters. So how do we let our passions push us forward without blinding us to the people, the moments, and the love that got us here in the first place? To explore this and many more, we have an amazing guest joining us today. He's a fourth-year medical student at Howard University, a future cardiologist, and an outdoor enthusiast. Welcome to the show, student Doctor Enniniya Kamalu.
Perfect. Just want to say, spitting, you was talking absolute facts without little preamble. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming through again. I first wanted to ask you the question, like, when you hear the word grit, like, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Honestly, it might be a little corny to say this, but I really think one of the first things that pops to my mind is really my mom. Like, she's very much like an old school, like, immigrant type of parent. And I remember, like, when I think about grit, the first, like, memory I have of her is, like, it was back in the day. So she was working as, like, a pharmacist, right? And she would be pulling, like, 10-hour, 12-hour shifts. And she was working crazy. She'd be doing, like, 5-6 shifts a week, 10, 12 hours. And I remember one time, I think she got into an accident or something like that, fell, tripped, ended up twisting her ankle. And so she was in a boot, right? And so, of course, you think that she would, like, kind of dial back. No, absolutely not. Wow. She's still going to work all this time. And then she still would be making time to, like, cook and take care of us kids, too. I remember getting home from school, walking into the kitchen as a kid, and I saw my mom. She'd just gone back from work. She literally has a chair. She has her leg up in the boots, and she's just standing in front of, like, 2 pots cooking. And I would just be like, you came back from work and you started cooking immediately? I was blown away, and I think just being around her like that kind of really helped to instill a lot of the values I just kind of grown to have.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I feel like, it's one of those things where it's crazy because it's the things that either you see or you don't see in those formative years of our lives that kind of set the framework, I think, for a lot of, like, who we become. So shout out to your mom, because I feel like, like my mom, I think it's something like when you see the woman who, like, I guess brought you into the world, it's like you have to have some kind of part of her to realize, like, if I could just be a fraction of that, like, I know I can do anything that I set my mind to. So, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's one of those things where, when I hear the word grit, it's one of those things, something that when I was writing this episode, it's the last part of the introduction where it's like the things that no one else sees. Like when, you're either in the gym or you're doing questions and you're like, man, I don't think I can, like, do anymore. It's like, let me just go ahead and try to knock out 5 more. Let me try to knock out 5 more sets. Let me try to, just, like, give a little bit more than what I thought I could. And that's like that then creates, like, a new foundation. I mean, a new, what is that called? Where you're talking about, like, a new stone.
Plateau.
A new plateau. Yeah, exactly. So you're like, oh man, I didn't even realize I could be this person.
Of course.
And so it's like, do you feel if, I guess, the foundation that was provided by your mom, if that wasn't there, who do you think you would have become?
Honestly, I can say, really the person who I've become now, I feel like is relatively pretty new, to be honest with you. So, like, my mom did give me, like, a really good foundation, and she really showed me, like, the things of, like, how to be resolute, how to, like, push, how to, like, really give your all. But when I was younger, to be honest with you, I was kind of lazy. I really never really pushed myself. I was very much a bare minimum kind of guy. Like I would do just enough where like people would get off my back, people wouldn't be trying to come for me or whatever, right? And I think the thing that really helped, like all the things I've seen from like my family, seen from my mom, helped to click in, was like I think my brother. So my brother, he's an amazing guy. He's been like playing sports. He's like even played professionally for a little bit, right? And he's very much like a hard-working type of guy. And we had sat down and we watched like The Last Dance, that documentary. And MJ was talking crazy, dropping dimes, and he's just like like you haven't practiced this hard, you haven't whatever. And I think like I watched that documentary and I was like, oh, even someone as good as MJ still had to practice like day and night to just stay on top of things. And my brother just looked at me and he's like, have you ever like tried your hardest at anything? And I was just like, I felt like at first, of course I was kind of salty. I'm like, yeah, I'd try, like of course, but then afterwards I'm just sitting down like, I don't know if I've ever truly tried my best at anything. And then I thought about like my mom, like how she tried so hard with everything she did. And it really made me want to I wanted to go into the future and be like, okay, I don't know if I'll ever be successful at this thing. I don't even know if I'll be good at this thing. But I want to at least be able to tell myself I did everything I can. Even if I do fail, at least I can take some solace in that. So I think it's like seeing my mom grow up gave the foundation, and then like having my brother confront me like that just kind of lit a spark in me.
Wow. And it's funny because it's like, that's why I think, like family is so important. It's funny because it's like, yeah, you can have these moments, but it also takes a person to be like, okay, yeah, let me get myself together. Because, you could have just as easily been like, man, my brother just being my brother, you know what I'm saying? Is he an older brother?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's like, bro, he's just talking, whatever. But you internalized it, and then you kind of created your own version of like, okay, I know I'm not going to be MJ, but I'm going to be MJ in my own right. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to practice. You know what I'm saying? I got here not because somebody gave it to me, it was because I took what I wanted. You know what I'm saying? And I think like it's so funny because when I was writing this episode, I don't know if you've ever had, cause I'm a Southern boy, so you have grits.
From Georgia, bro.
Yeah, them grits.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like that is the foundation of the day. You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those things where if you have a fresh meal ready to go, it allows you to start the day strong. You know what I'm saying? There's days, even this morning, I woke up, I didn't even have time because I just overslept and had no time for breakfast. I was literally like, you know what, I'm gonna just hop out, get ready for the world. Man, I was gassed, bro. I had to have like 2 cups of coffee. I'm just tired, but like having that sustenance, you know what I'm saying? That like something real, something raw, and it goes back to your family, because it's like they love me enough to be real and be honest with me and give me something authentic and genuine. And same thing, like, if they give you something to start and at least continue to grow and develop. And it's one of those things, it goes back to this analogy, and sorry if I'm flipping back and forth.
No,
hopefully it all makes sense, right?
Of course.
It's like when you make grits, if you want to make them good and smooth, you got to keep stirring that thing. It doesn't stop until you get to, you don't just put them in there and put the water in there and that's it. You got to continue to stir that thing. So and before we go on, it's kind of like a side comment. Do you eat grits? You eat grits?
Of course, bro.
Grits? Are you salt and pepper? You sugar team?
Bruh, I like my grits more savory. I'm sorry.
That's what I'm talking about.
Like, sweet grits is weird. I don't know. I think, you know what, I'm gonna say, to be political, I'm sure the sweet grits people have their points. I'm sure it's good. But I've really been more of a savory kind of grits guy.
That's what I'm saying. Honestly saying, bro. I was literally like, I'm hoping he's on the same side, because I was gonna look at it was gonna be just a quiet podcast.
That's how you, bro. Stripper grits, because I remember I had never really had stripper grits like that till I started going to like Georgia State and Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right? And some of my buddies, they took me out, and I'm like, it's good. That's not like what they told me about like the sugar grits. I'm like,
yeah,
grits is not really like oatmeal, but you know what?
Right.
I'm gonna stop right there. I'm not gonna alienate half your grits audience, bro.
No, I'm not. Hey, look, I'm with you though. I'm gonna be throwing tomatoes too. You know what I'm saying? But no, man, that's dope. And it's funny because I think it just kind of ties into everything that we've been talking about. Like you have the foundation, and then it goes from there to kind of who you become. And it's funny because the foundation of the word grit comes from Angela Duckworth, and she popularized the term, and it describes a combination of passion and perseverance through long-term goals. And her research showed that grit, more than raw talent or IQ, was a better predictor of success, right? But grit can't exist in a vacuum. It's shaped, like you said, by our environment, our relationships, like you said, your brother, my family. It allows us to kind of create this version of us, this grit within ourselves, and also the stories we tell ourselves, because sometimes you got to be a little delusional. It's like, it's allowed us to be here where we are today, right now. So it's one of those things where, what do you feel like you could pass on this kind of grit to the next generation? Your grit, and what does that look like to pass to your kids, if you want to have kids in the future, to your community and the people around you?
I think, honestly, if I wanted to pass it down, I've actually thought about this a little. I really think the thing about like kids is, kids are kind of lazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they'll only do as much as like they need to avoid like getting in trouble or avoid whatever. So I think there's two ways that you have to like pass on like the grit. First, you have to show them like it's fun to push yourself sometimes. You have to show them the fun of like being able to learn new things, the fun of being able to really push yourself and do things like you were saying that you didn't think you could do initially. And then two is you gotta kind of be on their neck about it. Like you need to be aware of like what their capabilities are. You know what I mean? And then when you see that they clearly aren't trying their best, and you know that they're just phoning it in, you gotta call them out for it. Be like, hey, I know you could do better. I've seen you. I'm aware of like how you run things. I'm aware of the things you can do, and I know that you can do better, and I expect better from you. I feel like whenever things happen like that as a kid, I was just like, dang, now I have to try. I can't get away with it anymore. So I feel like having that kind of consistency, having people, push you, show you how to enjoy yourself while pushing yourself, and then also hold you accountable. I think that's a really good way of instilling some kind of grit in like these younger fellows.
That's dope, man, and I like that. It's funny because I don't know, I find myself always like hyper analyzing, the things that people say in their interpretations, and it's when you said that, it almost like you were saying, kids when they grow up they're kind of lazy. Now I remember you saying when I grew up I was lazy.
Yeah.
And so it's almost similar. It's not also what you're teaching to your kids. It's also a version of yourself that you're also talking to when you're in these moments of, like, I don't feel like doing this. I don't feel like, it's an expectation. I have a standard and I have to meet that standard. And because of that, I expect my kids, expect nothing less from my children.
It's so funny you said that. Back when I was in like middle school, I was a C, a D student. I am not even joking, bro. I was one of them kids who was in summer school every single year from elementary school till the beginning of high school.
What?
I'm not joking. So one day I had this teacher I really liked. She was like a Caribbean, she was from the Jamaica, I think. So it was a Caribbean style lady. She was super cool, and she taught like a study skills course in middle school. Now me, I was one of the dumb kids. So I was in this special program where they were just like, hey, if you could get to the end of the year with C's and D's and no F's, we'll throw you a pizza party, right? And so, we make it to the end of the year, we're at this pizza party, and, I'm just going around, I find the lady, I like her, she's one of my favorite teachers, I come up on her, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm glad to see you at the pizza party, I did it, I was able to get it. And she just looks at me, she's like, do you think getting C's and D's is good enough? Do you think that's something to be proud of? And I remember looking at her and just being like, you guys threw the party. I just came here. Like, I'm not the one who made this party. But it also made me think too, I was like, I guess maybe I could have tried harder.
Yeah.
Maybe she did have higher expectations of me.
Right. But I mean, in your head, you was like, all I got to do is not get an F.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So do you feel like if like the standard, if they were to raise the standard like to C's, it would have been like, I guess I gotta.
Exactly. I think a lot of kids are like, because like, you're like, hey, you're gonna get this party, and it's like, okay, well, like I could have probably gotten like C's if I like felt like I needed to. But as a kid, I was like, okay, just don't fail. All right, I'll just not fail the classes this year.
That's real. It's funny because I felt like it's one of those things where it's interesting because I think it comes back to kind of where we are in our lives right now, where it's like, I personally think there's been this pressure for us to achieve a certain level of success and like doing all these things, and then like now you get to a place where it's like, you could be studying, you could be trying to get things ready, and now it's like you have to find something that's like within you, like an intrinsic thing.
Of course.
And it's kind of like that. It's like, well, I did what I needed to do. There's no fire under me. And I think that's where a lot of us, and I mean me included, like I found myself, I'm like, I really want to start studying for step 3. And I want to start getting ready for this next part of my journey, but there's no pizza party. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do you feel like there's a way for kind of switch that intrinsic or the extrinsic motivation to the intrinsic kind of internal pizza party?
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the outside, whatever, you know, anybody has for you, whatever. How do you, I guess, flip that?
I think, I can't speak on everyone, but one of the ways I tried to like flip it was, you know, as like a kid growing up, I'd always try to like imagine like, you know, if I could be like the ideal version of myself. I'd have these things of like, okay, well, if I was to do everything I could probably be good at this, or I could get better at this, I could whatever. And then like, I would always try my best to get as close to like the ideal version of myself as possible. So I think like in times like that, I would be like, okay, well, you know, I could start studying for step 3 later, but I'll be like, okay, well, you know, if I was lived in a perfect world, I would already be like on top of my study and I'd always whatever. So I'd just be like, okay, well, I can't live in a perfect world and I can't be on top of everything anyway. So I'll meet myself halfway where it's like, okay, well, I'll just like run through somewhere, I'll just review a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's like the grit you were talking about earlier where it's like, it'll just make me feel like, okay, let me just get a couple more questions. Let me get a whatever. Because I always think about like, if I could be the best version of myself, this is how I would be acting. So I can take maybe just one step towards that direction.
I like that. And how would you, I guess, define that best version of Enniniya?
I think the best version of Enniniya, to be honest with you, I feel like the best version of Enniniya, one of the things I feel like I have run into issues with people sometimes is like, a lot of people would like talk to me and they'd be like, oh, you know, like I've been having issues with this thing, I've been having issues with that thing. You know, do you think that would make me look worse if I wasn't able to be like immediately successful at this thing, or I'm having difficulties learning, or I feel like I'm not keeping up, blah, blah, blah. And I would always tell them that like, I'm someone who's always believed that like the hard work is way more important than necessarily the results, because sometimes the hardest part is dialing in the work, you know what I mean? Like I feel like if you're putting the work in consistently, you're doing everything you should be doing, it just takes a matter of time before the results will come. So I think when I think about the ideal version of Enniniya, it's somebody who's able to continuously push myself and then continuously learn from like the mistakes I make. So I'll see like, you know, studying for this exam, I'll be like, I don't know if ideal Enniniya would like pass the exam or even do well, but at least he would be in there putting the work in to be able to be like, I did everything I could. I ran through all the question banks. I ran through all the resources. I've done everything, and like, you know, it's just in God's hands now.
That's dope. I like that, because it's not like, oh, when I get to this, like when I become a cardiologist, like when I get the nice car and the nice house, and you know, my girlfriend and I are married, that's the ideal version of me. It's the internal, and that's why I really resonate with that, because I think a lot of us get into a space of where we're constantly chasing these things, this finish line, but there's always a new finish line. And that's how I think you essentially burn out, because I found myself, like, this is being like 100% transparent. Like, I was always known as the guy in college that, you know, I was med school, like people would call me that. And like, I was like, well, you know, like I just have to get to this goal. I have to get to the end. I gotta graduate medical school because this is like my identity. This is a part of me. And then like you get through medical school, or at least we're on the back end of it. Lord willing, we get to walk the stage on May 9th, you know what I'm saying? But it's one of those things where I'm like, but I'm bigger than this now, because I've already passed that threshold, and now there's this there's 4 more years of residency. There's, you know, years of military service. There's, you know, like having kids, whatever. And so like, are you just this one thing, or are you, like you said, the drive, the force, you pushing forward to like, you know what, who are you like internally? Like, and it's by the actions. Like, it's the things that you don't do when somebody else is, when, you know, things you do when no one is watching, the things you push yourself to do. Because I think the grit that we have within one area has to permeate to others, right? You don't want to have, like, it's like, dang, I don't want to do 5 questions on UWorld today, but I'm going to do them. Oh, you know what? I don't want to have this conversation with my girl because it's hard, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and have it. I'm going to apologize because even though I don't feel like, you know, but I'll explain myself, even though I feel like I'll be shut down, but I'm going to push through that feeling.
Of course.
And there's that, like, it's that new version of yourself that now exists because of it. And because I found myself always thinking, like, what if all the things that, like, if I wasn't vulnerable in this situation, or I didn't push myself harder, who would I be? And, like, what would I look like?
I'm of two minds when it comes to stuff like that. I think, like, one, like you said, you just change so much because you push yourself. Like, even the person you are now, if we were to compare it to, like, Kennedy pre-med school, like a completely different person. But I also think a part of me is, like, the core of a person. It kind of reminds me of this, like, statement I'd seen where they were talking about, like, Republicans versus, like, Democrats or whatever, and, like, one side will feel like the other side is, like, immoral or unfair, right? But, like, if you really look at it, their, like, core beliefs are similar, where they believe in freedom, they believe in equality, and they believe everyone should have a fair shot. And then you start going into how they implemented it beliefs. It's different. And because of the way they implement it, they'll start being like, oh, well, you don't believe in this thing. And the person will be like, of course I believe in this thing. So I think, like, when it comes to you, Kennedy, I think, like, you have those core beliefs in you since you've been, like, a young man. Whereas, like, sure, you might not be this exact same Kennedy if you were to, like, look at a parallel world or whatever. But I think you probably have a lot of the similar traits because you're the kind of person who would want to push yourself. You're the kind of person, even if, like, you were born in a world where you weren't interested in medical school, I think you would still seek things that would, like, kind of push you, kind of, like, intellectually stimulate you, things that would make you a better person than, like, initially when you started them. Because that's just part of who you are. So if you were to remove that aspect, like, would you even really be Kennedy anymore?
That's real. That's an interesting question. Would I? And then that goes to the question, which is, like, I know we're not, like, out into we're now expanding into the metaverse, you know what I'm saying? But, like, who are we really? You know? Like, I don't know. And I was just having this conversation with one of my other friends. It's like, I asked him, I was like, who are you? And it was like, there's really no, like, concrete answer. But I would love to know, like, when I'm like, who is Enniniya? Like, who are you?
You know, honestly, I think, did I ever tell you that I used to be obese back in the day?
No.
I'm telling you. So not only was I dumb, I was also fat too. Let's just say I wasn't exactly wrong. All premium dice rolls. I'm just joking. But anyway, when I was younger, like, I think I was just going through a lot emotionally. So I started, like, just eating a lot. And the food was just comforting to me. Even if I didn't really necessarily like the after effects of it, that brave comfort was enough to just keep me hooked on it. You know what I'm saying? And it got to a point where I was, like, no lie, I was 14 and 290 pounds.
Wow.
And I couldn't do a single push-up to save my life. So it was not muscle, I'll tell you that. And I started, like, it made me realize, like I wanted to be, like, a different person. So, I got really obsessed with, like, weight tracking and blah, blah, blah. It took a couple years, I ended up losing the weight. But then I was like, okay, I look really bad, skinny, I can't pull it off, it's not a look for me. So I had to, like, start bulking up and more. So, like, over the past, like, I think it's about 8 years ago was when it really started. I lost a bunch of weight because I felt like I had something to prove to myself. I'd always struggled with weight, like, for most of my young life. And I want to be able to, like, show me that I can't do it. I want to be able to tell myself, like, look, this is not something, like, you can't achieve it if you really believe in yourself, blah, blah, blah. So I had something to prove to myself. So I did it, and I changed this, and I got better at this. So I lost the weight, and then I wanted to become a better leader, so I started taking more leadership stuff, and I wanted to become a better student, so I started, like, studying harder. It got to a point where I was like, who am I? Because, like, the way I was expressing and, like, showing myself to the world had changed so much. I had to have a conversation where I was like, the core of me hasn't changed. Maybe the physical expression, the way I look, the way I talk, it's different. But the things I believed in hasn't changed. My wanting to be in medicine, the way, like, the things I want to do in the future, the activism I want to do, all of those stayed the same. So that's why a part of me is really, like, biased towards that view of maybe your core really represents who you are more than necessarily the outside or even the things you say or do.
Wow, that's dope. I mean, that was beautiful because in my mind, I think a lot of us, and me personally, when I say a lot of us, I'm always talking about me.
Hey, easy to relate to.
Right, is one of those things, like, it's, you see yourself evolve so many times and change so many times that you kind of fear that you won't know who you are in the future because you look so differently in so many ways, whether that's, whether you joined the leadership group, whether you joined a fraternity, whether you joined, you said at first you wanted to be a firefighter when you were younger, then you became a doctor, and then you went into the army, whatever. And because you're constantly going through these, like, constant cycles and evolutions, it's like, if you don't know what that core is, and not even saying if you're not in tune with the core, because I think all of us have an idea of what that is and what that looks like. It's hard. It's easy to get lost in the motion, because I think all of us, evolution is something that whether you want to do it or not, it's like it's gonna happen, right? Like you're gonna change, you're gonna grow, you're gonna struggle, you're gonna love, you're gonna laugh, you're gonna have everything happen to you in a way where it's gonna continue to grow and look differently, even though the feeling that comes from it is all the same. And the reason why it's like one of those things where you know that for sure. It's like we live on this rock that rotates, and in a solar system, in a place that rotates, and it continues to spin, and it's gonna come back to the same place over and over again. And so it's like, if you know the inner, right? Even though this thing is rotating and spinning, what is actually on this planet? And what I mean by that is like the inner self, right? Like the mountains. What are your mountains? What are your oceans? You know, because when you're constantly spinning, I think you can become disoriented if you're not aware that, you know, gravity got you. And that's why we're not like dizzy all the time, because all these other physics things, I was terrible in physics, so I'm not even gonna go there. But yeah, that's so I really like that. Like I liked how you were saying, like the core, you evolved so many times, and you're like, dang, okay, like the outside looks different, but the inside is still the same. And it's how I'm putting myself out into the world that looks differently, but it's all coming from the same place.
Of course.
So that's dope. And you know, I think it's a beautiful transition into the next part of this conversation, which is, you know, you get I think we get sometimes so like focused on the vision and the goals, and like we're putting ourselves, we're projecting this like inner core belief out into the universe, that, you know, it kind of starts to cloud the things that maybe once kept us grounded, right? And this is like, you know, like the other side of grit. You know, you get caught up in pursuing your goals, and you lose sight of the very things, you know, that you know brought us connection, the people around us. You know, when was the last time you called your mom? You know, when was the last time you had a date night with your girl? You know, our peace, right? Because that's one of the things that's first to go when you're especially, you know, studying or trying to get through this, and then maybe, you know, eventually to the next thing of your life. That's the first thing that we like. Well, the peace that'll come back once we get to the end.
Oh yeah.
But you already said there's no. So it's like, are we present? Are we in the moment? Are we just kind of just going with the flow? So like, how do you keep your vision clear while still moving forward with this passion and this core of you that is outwardly being put out into the universe? And have you ever found yourself pushing yourself so hard that you stop to ask, like, what am I missing?
I'm telling you, that used to be one of my biggest issues. So, like, I was one of those people where it's like, you know, I'd be burning the candle at both ends. I'd be working, I'd be thinking I'm really spinning, I'm really cooking it up, right? And I would never realize I was getting really stressed out. But everybody else in my life would realize I was getting really stressed out.
You're like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. I was one of those people where it's like, I would just get like more short with people, and I would get more like just annoying to be around. And then like literally would be after a while where like my girl would literally call me out, and I'm just like, yeah, you're right, I am being annoying. And I'd have to sit back and be like, oh, I think I'm stressed out. And she just looks at me like I'm an idiot, like, yeah, I think you are. And I think like I had to just kind of like, one of the ways I try to help counteract that is just taking more time to like appreciate what you have in the moment. I know for a lot of people who are interested in like medicine, being doctors, you're like a very type A person. You want to get it. You have goals, you have dreams, you have ambitions, you have things that you really want to make a reality. And like the most frustrating thing about having these dreams, especially when they're very important to you, is you want them to exist now. You're not interested in just waiting. It's like someone tells you, oh yeah, you could do that in like 10 years. Like, bro, that's not trying to hear that. I want that within 1 year at most. That's me being patient. So you want that now. So it's like, I think part of what like I've tried to do more is just kind of like slowly taking the time and appreciate the progress you've made so far. Where it's like, hey, you know, you haven't, like let's say someone who's in the midst of med school, like the second year or something. Like, hey, you haven't made it all the way to the end, but you're like a second year. And like, what you have now, the you from before you got into med school would be flabbergasted. Like, they couldn't believe that this is the life you're living now. And then when you become a third year, it's like you're literally in the hospital, you're seeing patients, you're getting these real clinical experiences that most people couldn't even imagine. And I think taking the time to just slowly appreciate what you've accumulated as you head over to this big goal, it helps. I'm not gonna say it's like a perfect one-to-one, it fixes everything, but I do think like when you take the time and really look at it and be like, oh, okay, like I made it through med school, like I'm I'm literally almost done. I've matched. I have all of these things that like were completely a dream to me when I first came in. Like you're like Kenny, like with you, you're established now, right? You have a job lined up. You know you're gonna go over there. You're gonna do your best. You're gonna kill it, and then eventually you're gonna build those connections, and you already have like a rampart to like the rest of your career. That's something that you didn't have like 2-3 years ago. You were still trying to figure out like what you were trying to do, how you're gonna live your life. So you've already come so far. I think taking the time to appreciate those accumulated efforts is really what helps with people like this.
I think that dampens that voice of that inner voice of like you still don't have it all figured out. You still don't like. Are you sure this is what you want to do with your life? Because I found myself doing that a lot, where it's like I'm one of those people that I didn't know that I wanted to do psych until the very end, and I was like, oh wow, I can see myself doing this. And it was in a space in my life where I just felt so like enlightened and determined and ambitious. But it was like I forget that sometimes. And it's like you said, like being in the moment, even when I feel like there's times where we can just, be trying to push the next thing. These are the things that I think like dampen the blow of when the wave is so enormous that it feels like it'll drown you.
Of course.
So I really do like that, because it's these little things, and it's not, and it goes to what you were saying, like it's a process to get to where we are and what we're doing with our lives. And like you've shown in your journey and in your life, it's like if I was static, I wouldn't be right here right now. Like, and I appreciate all the dynamic way that life presents itself. And I think that's really cool, really cool.
Yeah, you gotta keep swimming, bro.
Yeah.
You're just eventually gonna drown.
Yeah, got to, man. And continuing with the topic of grit, the next segment is planting the seed, in which we ask our guests to bring in a quote that embodies today's topic. So, what is a quote that helps you stay grounded and gritty, and something that reminds you why you keep showing up?
I think it's just, there's two things that really pop up. Is it okay if I have two, or do I get one? I think the first one, like again, I'm gonna use my mama because I'm corny. But my mom, one of the things she'd always tell me, like this is like probably one of the things she says the most, is just like, it is what it is. And I think to me that eventually kind of culminated to meaning like, no matter how bad a situation is or what's going on, it just is what it is. Like this is what we're going through right now. This is what it is, and we're just gonna have to deal with it and push past it. So like you feel like your life is falling apart. You feel like all the things you've put together are falling apart and coming down, crashing on you. It's a terrible feeling. It feels like the world is ending, right? But sometimes you just need to like step back, maybe take an hour or two, cry it out, sit down, and just be like, the situation, it is what it is. This is what's happening. I'll just figure it out like I've always done. And I think that kind of mindset helps me a lot when like things just, when things, this absolutely can't happen, this absolutely can't fail, and then it always fails, and then now you're left afterwards. That my kind of mindset is what helps me really just deal with situations like that, and help me realize like there is no bottom of the barrel. You know what I mean? There's always gonna be you. Like no matter what happens, you're always gonna be you. You're gonna sometimes you're gonna fail that test you just couldn't afford to fail. Sometimes you're gonna miss that appointment you couldn't afford to miss. Sometimes you're gonna lose that opportunity you couldn't afford to lose. And you're still gonna be yourself afterwards, and you're gonna have to keep pushing, because just no matter what happens, it is what it is. You'll still be here, and you'll still be able to go for it. The last one is a lot less things to unpack. Is just the whole Rome thing. Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying stones every hour. And that just reminds me, like, I have this dream of things I want to build, these big, plans or whatnot, and I can't have them right now, but I can still lay the foundation and keep eventually building up to it.
Wow, that's one of those things where they kind of almost like they go together, like they're the same. It's like you continue to lay these bricks, and regardless of whatever like weather comes, it's like that's not gonna stop me from laying this next one. And it continues. I don't know why. Like, it's like the thing that you said before. It just continues like constantly like ringing in my mind, which is like it's not the end goal. It's this internal drive of like who you are. You're creating by doing these certain things. You're creating an inner self, more or less than the actual outer things that you're trying to do. Like, yeah, the mansion's nice, the car is nice, whatever. But it's you're creating something that's gonna last far beyond the even generations after we're gone. I think because these are the things that your kids see, the community sees, and they pass on to their kids, and it lasts forever. That was really, really beautiful. I really did like that. Like those two things. And so, you know, to kind of close everything out, I one of my favorite segments of the show, it's called To Harvest and Ripen. And here we'll pull a card from a game We're Not Really Strangers, not a sponsor.
Okay.
And answer it authentically to harvest and ripen a deeper meaning of ourselves and each other. So I'll have you pull first, and then, so yeah, 2.
Okay.
And then ask me, and then I'll pull and ask you.
All right, let's go.
Let's do it.
So, first card.
If it's red, then you can put it back.
How are you, really?
Man, how am I? I would probably say, like, it's hard to define right now. I feel like it's like, how am I? I think like on the upper level of like myself on the default, it's like I'm good, right? But then there's this like deeper version of myself that's like, I'm like, I think we're in a place now where we're trying to, it's kind of almost like in flux a little bit. Like you're waiting for this next phase of your life. It's kind of like jumping from an airplane, but you can't jump. You're just sitting there, and the guy's just like holding you, and I'm like, bro, just let me go. So it's one of those things. I feel like it's like that, and then also I'm trying to get in the place of my life where I'm content in the moment, but there's always this like loud voice of like, I always knew I wanted to be married. I always knew I wanted to have kids. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor, but it's not here yet.
I know. I feel like we were just talking about
Yeah.
that.
So I think that's why this conversation has been really fulfilling for me, but I feel like there's a place where I think it's almost like a not instability, not a negative, but I think there's a space between
Like
anticipation and like certainty, like that I think is like creates a little uneasiness, like that I'm just like, I don't know. Like I feel like I should be happy. Yeah, like this is like where we should. This is where we've been.
I think I feel you. It's one of those feelings where it's like you're doing everything you need to do, but you're still not like far along enough for you to be like comfortable. You know what I mean? Where you're like, I'm going to be a doctor, but I still need to like do all the things to be successful. Yeah. So it's like it's a weird feeling.
Yeah, man, and it's like it's one of those things where too, it's like I think it leaks out into like relationships too. Where you're with your girl, and like I proposed to my girlfriend in December, and yeah, thank you, and it's like I know this is the person that I want to spend forever with, but forever doesn't come tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
And it's those like every day is a choice now. Like you get to a place where love isn't a feeling anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a choice, and it also spreads out into like medicine and life.
Yeah.
It's like you love something. It goes, that feeling goes away where it's like, oh yeah, there are sparks in there where you're like, oh, like I'm glad I saved a patient. Oh, I'm glad like we had this date night. Oh, I'm glad, I'm getting to connect with a friend. But I feel like it was like in the version of myself, like, years ago when I was envisioning this version, it was more of a higher plateau of happiness and joy that I was anticipating. And I think maybe that was it.
I think I understand. No, I think I definitely understand where you're coming from. When I first got into med school, I think I was happy for about 1 hour. And then afterwards, like, I think it was just a feeling of like relief. Because it felt like, thank God, now I can move on to the next phase of my life. Because, I'm happy I got in, but it's more just like, it felt like you were just kind of waiting to begin the next phase. And I think, I'm not sure, like, I can speak on it 100%, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like maybe you're like at that point as well where you're just like, I'm excited that I did everything I was supposed to. I'm excited I have like my girl, I want to marry her, I'm excited, but like you're in between like 2 phases of like your main life. Like this was the Kennedy in medical school, next is going to be like the Kennedy moving into the medical field. So it's now you're going to be taking like doing things differently, doing more and more and more, and so it's like you're almost in a transition point where it's like I'm happy, but it's also like there's still so much work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak on you and put words in your mouth.
No. I do. I think that you pretty much hit the nail on the head. And like, do you feel like, how would you feel like you would, I guess, find contentment in a place like this in a transition period? How do you find contentment?
I feel like I'm probably very similar to you, where it's like it does have like an underlying sense of like anxiety. I wouldn't say anxiety. I would say like you were saying anticipation.
I was gonna say mine's anxiety. So
Alright, okay,
Hey.
fine. I'm gonna be real.
Hey,
Maybe
hey.
some anxiety. I was trying to act tough for the camera. You know how it is. I ain't scared of nothing, yo. But no.
They're like, you're 6'7", you don't
Exactly.
even be scared.
Exactly, bro. You think I'm scared of residency? Yeah, don't let these male people hear that. But anyway, but to be honest though, like, I think there is like a feeling of just like anxiety because it's like, you know, like you've essentially like learned really well how to like acclimate to the climate of medical school. You know where to go, you know who to talk to, you know what to do, da da da. But now you're moving into like the medical field. You know, a lot of the things you're doing now, like you're playing for keeps. To be honest with you, like you need these connections with these people. You need these attendings to like you because that's going to be good for your career. And then you have to figure out like how to actually like be there doing the stuff. Giving like taking care of your patients, managing a census, prescriptions, all of that such. And so it's like, I think that is like you're excited, like you've made it, you've done the things you want to do. But there's also like now I feel like in the past you didn't know like what being like moving on to the next phase of being a doctor would include. So you just assume like, okay, well I'm gonna achieve my dream, so you're happy. But like now, like you've gone so much further, you've grown so much, you've like just reached another level, like you were saying. You know what the next level will include, and so you're excited to be a doctor, but you're also pensive because it's like it's gonna be a lot though.
Right.
It's gonna be really hard.
Yeah.
So it's one of those feelings of like I'm excited to do this, but this is gonna probably be really bad.
Yeah.
It's like when you have like a cold pool where you're like I want to go swimming, but I'm gonna have to jump in this cold pool, and at least the first couple seconds are gonna be terrible.
Right.
I think it's like that's kind of the feeling I have in my heart too.
I like that.
Where I'm like I know like I'm gonna enjoy swimming in this pool. It's a hot day, I'm gonna enjoy it. But the pool is freezing cold, so I know that until I can acclimate to it, it's gonna be a terrible experience. So I'm just kind of standing there like I have to jump, but I don't know how I'm gonna deal with the first couple seconds of adjusting to it.
That's real. I really like that, and I think I don't even have any words to add to that. That was just beautiful. I appreciate that, man. You ready for your card? Let's do it. Oh, this is so funny.
Oh,
when was the last time you surprised yourself?
When was the last? I think this is good for like what we were discussing through the podcast so far. I think one of the times I surprised myself was so growing up as like a big kid, I was never good at like exercise, and I had a very limited way I looked at the world. I always just assumed like you were just born good at like stuff. You know what I mean? Like the people who are good at school are just naturally good at school. People who are good at sports are just naturally good at sports. So I always assumed throughout most of my like adolescence, like I would just never be that guy, Like I would just be something that always limited me. And when I decided to like, I really wanted to prove something to myself and I started going through the weight loss journey, what surprised me was just how much I was willing to do, like you were talking about, that extra set or that extra rep. Like I really do feel like a lot of times I thought that I was gonna give up. Like I thought I was just gonna be done. But for some reason I would be sitting there and I would just be in my head like, let's just do 5 more. Or I'd be really tired and exhausted. I didn't eat properly. I would go in and I'd want to leave. Like I'm just basically like, this day sucks. I want to get out of here. But then a part of my mind would be like, well, let's just do the bare minimum and then we can leave. And I think I was surprised by the fact that I wanted to push myself way more than I thought that I would. I wanted to do more than I thought I even could. And I think that surprised me. It kind of showed me that for the longest time, I had been limiting myself. I was the one who was holding myself back. So that was something that definitely surprised me.
Wow, man. And it's crazy. Like, what would you say to the people to get to that place where you can surprise yourself? Not necessarily like just in medicine, but just like life in general. Because it's a breakthrough. It's crazy. One of those things where you're like, I'm a version of myself that I never knew I could be. Like what does it take? How do you get to that place in your mind so you can kind of get through that and get over and get to that next phase of you?
I think honestly, it's hard for me to say. Honestly, it's a tough question. I feel like it's one of those things that we were talking about with the whole like take a horse to water versus making them drink. I feel like we were saying it needs to be a culmination of both like extrinsic factors like family, friends, society, blah 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 blah, and then intrinsic. But I also think the best way to do it is just do things that you don't think that you would be good at. Do things that you like. Do things that you are normally adverse to doing, and then give yourself grace. You know what I mean? Don't just like go completely like, let's say you're somebody who wants to lose weight and you want to start running. You know what I mean? Don't be crazy and run like 100 kilometers in one day or something, right? But like start like maybe just with going for a walk, going for a jog. And I think as your body starts like acclimating to this new experience, you'll be surprised by the fact that you'll usually want to do more. If you start like low and start like so progressively going higher and higher, a lot of people get surprised by the fact they'll be like, oh, I want to go for a walk again. You know, I want to start running next time. Maybe I'll go for a jog instead of just a walk. I think that's one of the ways that you'll really just surprised by yourself by just how much you want to keep improving.
I like that. Set a goal you can reasonably attain. Because I'd be one of them ones I haven't ran in 10 weeks, and I try to go out there and run 10 miles or something.
Bro, I hadn't sprinted in forever. I think I was just like, I'll just sprint up this hill, bro. I think I don't know what I did, bro, but I had to just be walking with a limp for like a week afterwards. I was like, dang, man.
Why did I do that?
I am not young enough. I need to stretch and properly like build up to this.
Yeah, man. You got to, especially in our age, man. You know
I
what I'm
know,
saying?
man.
Getting old, man.
I know, y'all young cats wouldn't know, man. As an old man, you gotta stretch before you do things nowadays, bro.
You stretch waking up, you yawn and you'll pull something.
I'm telling you, bro. I remember I was literally just stretching, and I just did a deep stretch because I was like, oh yeah, I could do this when I was younger. And then I'm pulling something, bro.
Oh, for real?
It was during rounds, too, man. The doctor was just like, yeah, you gotta go take a seat. We'll be back. Don't be like me.
Yeah, no.
Pace yourselves, please.
Hey, stretch, everybody. That's the main takeaway from you. Stretch.
Exactly. Getting older is tough. And stretch.
Oh, man. Well, guys, that wraps up another episode of Stranger Fruit. Today's conversation brought us closer to understanding what it means to move forward with grit. We learned that grit can be a foundation. It can hold us down when life tries to shake us. But we also understand they can get in our eyes if we aren't careful. If we forget to stay true to ourselves, stay connected, and most of all, stay present. And also, guys, make sure you stretch. So thank you, Enniniya, for sharing this space with me. Do you want to let do you want to let the people know where they can find you on socials or?
My socials are terrible right now. In the future, I will be posting more. That's something I'm working on. But honestly, when I get more better socials, I'll probably put them out there.
Okay, no worries.
Just to end things off, thank you so much. My boy, Doctor Enniniya over here, having me on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking with you. Hope I didn't ramble too much, but always a pleasure speaking. Bro.
This is amazing, man, and I really appreciate you. Again, this has been a special conversation. Anytime I can, chat with you, it's always real. So thank you. Thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. And remember, the most sustainable fruit isn't just the ones planted here. It's derived through meaningful conversations such as these. So don't be afraid to plant seeds of your own around you. You'll never know what might sprout. Until next time.
Perfect.
Yeah, man.
That was beautiful, bro.
Hey, man. I appreciate you.
Kennedy, I never knew we had so much in common.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? We gotta kick it, man, before you head out.